Hello boyos, Rich Boy J here back in with another video, and today is going to be yet another episode of the LEGO Star Wars MOC Showcase. This is a series I've created to highlight some of the best MOCs I've come across on the internet, so if you find any of the MOCs in this video impressive, all I ask that you go to the links in the description and support the builders by giving them a like, comment, or even a follow. The first MOC we're going to take a look at today is titled Traitor's End by builder Darth Bjorn. When you first look at it, you would probably assume it's from Mustafar, but it's actually not. It's from a planet called Serapin, which was predominantly in Star Wars Legends, and I guess now was referenced in a book or two in a new canon. But nonetheless, the build techniques in this thing are just great. I think your eyes are instantly drawn towards the lava details at the bottom, and that's something I kind of wanted to talk about. A lot of people take an approach for building lava using like trans orange and trans red pieces, which I think looks good, but this is an interesting and I think just very nice looking approach to it as well. I always love it when people are building snot to incorporate just more fine details into the ground, and I think that like the lava in this MOC specifically is excellently executed. The colors in there just look so vibrant, and I mean, if you were, just kind of casually walking by, strolling by MOCs, this one would definitely be one that pops, not even just looking at anything else in the MOC, but just honing in on that lava detail. So I certainly give him a lot of credit for doing that. I also really like the scaffolding that's kind of holding up the bridge that the minifigs are sitting on over towards the left side. I think it's really cool that he has, I don't know if that's flex tubing, it's some kind of like pipe or cord kind of going through that. I think that looks really good as well, and I think that those sign clip pieces on it look nice. If you look like really closely towards the bottom of that little bridge, it looks like there's some chains hanging from it, which I always just like little details like that, add just some nuances to a MOC that could, I mean, you could easily just build the bridge and not really do much with it, but it's really those fine details that make a MOC pop. I think one of my favorite parts of this MOC is right by the figures on the left side. If you look, there's like a panel that has been removed from the ground, and there's like some greebling in the ground as well, and I just think that looks really cool, like not even really knowing kind of the story behind this MOC or exactly what's going on. Like, I mean, the implication from the title is obviously like there is some traitor on this planet in the Imperial ranks and he has now been found out, but just, I don't know, just those details like that I feel really just go a long way in giving life to a MOC on a planet that you've probably never seen or maybe have never even heard of. One of the things that I have to talk about on this MOC are those wall details. I always make it a point in this series to talk about wall details because it's something that I feel a lot of people are constantly looking for inspiration on. If you're building a MOC and it's very easy to just build walls straight up, and you would want to just kind of increase your, I guess, library of wall design. So I always try my best to incorporate MOCs with interesting wall designs, and this one certainly fulfills that criteria. He's using that like old school engine piece in the wall, which I don't know if I've ever even seen someone use that on a wall before. So I like that a lot. It definitely meshes well with the, I guess, bar aesthetic of those grill tiles, as well as those lattice cheese slopes as well. I think that the usage of the brown pieces in there also just makes it look really nice, especially with the minifig hands kind of serving as little protrusions from the pipes. If you look on the bottom right side, I guess that's like a cart on that ledge. With, I don't know, maybe like some sort of power source or an engine to a potential vehicle, and I just like that build a lot. I think it looks really cool, kind of using those lightsaber pieces with the hands on them to create just furthermore details in that. I love the little technical bits that people can incorporate in Star Wars MOCs, because that's something that regardless of what you're building, you could probably include something like that in your MOC. So those are just always really good for inspiration. Finally, I really like the usage of those, I guess, fuel cells or cargo crates, whatever that is, on the left side of the MOC. I think the orange in those just really makes it pop. It's just kind of a cool way to incorporate a bit more color in a mostly gray and dark gray Imperial infrastructure. I always like to give a ton of credit to MOCs like these, where the scenario going on that we're not really familiar with, but just by looking at the photo you can tell what's going on, and it's still immersive. It's very easy to look at like a build that maybe even looks really cool, but you don't necessarily know what it's about, or you're not even interested in what it's about. But when a builder can just kind of captivate you and just have you constantly looking for details and trying to figure out the story they can tell, I think that is just one of the many beauties of building MOC. Next up, we have a MOC titled Master of the Knights of Ren by NS Brick Designs. It is clearly from the Rise of Skywalker trailer where Kylo Ren puts the edge of his lightsaber just right through some sort of soldier, and I love that that's been recreated in this. He also has a flame trooper in the background just kind of wreaking havoc on those trees. I like the tree design, or I guess more specifically the burnt tree design. There's just a good usage of parts in there. I see like the battle droid arms, there's of course some bars, some claw pieces, even some stud shooters in there. So I haven't been serving myself well by throwing those away, because clearly like people are finding creative ways to use those. So that's a good use for a part that is otherwise pretty much garbage in my opinion. This is one of those MOCs that I'd say is kind of packed full of detail for something that's essentially just a small vignette. Of course, can't ignore that black border at the bottom. There's something about those black borders, man. But yeah, I like the leaves kind of spruced around the MOC as well, even on the rock work on the side. It just kind of helps incorporate more color into those rocky areas on the sides, and I think the rock work actually looks pretty cool as well. I like the usage of those curved slopes. It's something I feel you don't typically see very often with rock work, so it kind of helps make it look a little bit more dynamic than it otherwise would. The last thing I wanted to say, that for a MOC that, like I said, is really just a small vignette, this MOC is just very lively. There's so much action going on. Of course, you have Kylo in the front laying waste to some soldier. You have the flame trooper in the back just obliterating the scenery, and there's like trees on fire, they're burnt, they're falling over, like all those things I think just make this MOC look really lively, so I give him a lot of credit for that. Next build is entitled I Am Your Father, and it's by CreativBricks, and I really like the concept of this build. Just the general shape of it reminds me a lot of that Duel on Naboo set that LEGO released a few years back with Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, and Darth Maul. And I really feel like with their kind of trend now of making little vignettes like this in the $25 to $30 range, this would be like a perfect build to do, right? Like Cloud City came out, we got the Cloud City Luke, so maybe within the next year or two, if they want to make that figure a little bit more easily accessible, I could totally see them doing a set like this, including like Luke, Vader, and a build like this for the iconic Star Wars scene. It's honestly kind of shocking they haven't done that, but nonetheless, I really do like this build. For one, just the scene is of course just so iconic, probably the most iconic Star Wars scene of all time, and there's some pretty good build techniques in this as well. I'm always going to give builders credit for using flex tubing. Flex tubing is just one of the most versatile parts in LEGO for obvious reasons. It's flexible, so you can do pretty much anything you want with it, and I always like it when builders can incorporate that. I think there's a nice usage of color on the pathway as well. Those yellow and red tiles kind of help break up a little bit of the monotony of what's mostly just a light gray structure. I think that the black base for this also just makes it look more like a premium MOC, like something you'd see on someone's like shelf or whatever. I really like the technique he used to kind of make the rounded base on the bottom of the platform that Vader is standing on. It's kind of hard to see how those little assemblies are connected to each other, but it looks nice. It's a nice round shape, which I like. One of the kind of funny things about this build is if you look right behind Vader, you can actually see Luke's hand and the lightsaber just kind of chilling out there, which is a funny thought, right? Like, I mean, what if Vader just decided during that scene after he cut off Luke's hand, like, oh, I might want to keep that lightsaber. Let me go ahead and just use the Force, catch that, put it right beside me. I'll just grab that thing on the way out. But yeah, I just think this is a really solid build, and this is one of those things, like, I saw this and I'm like, that's such a good idea for just a vignette build. Like, I'm honestly shocked we don't see more builds like this, and of course that LEGO hasn't made a set that is just this, because it just makes way too much sense. The final MOC we're going to take a look at today is by Servon Lego, and it is a giant, huge Mos Espa Arena MOC from episode 1, most notably seen in the Podrace. And this MOC has been inspirational to me on so many levels. I have spent so much time in my life just gazing at this thing, taking in all the intricate details, and really just appreciating the feat that this is, because it is such a large-scale MOC of really my favorite part of episode 1 and probably my favorite part of the prequels, the Podrace. And the fact that someone created it on such a large scale, which is a project that you guys very well know that I have been flirting with, working on and off for really since the beginning of my MOC career. This MOC is pretty special to me, so I'm really excited to finally talk about it here on the MOC Showcase. So the first photo we have is really just a big picture of the overall stadium, and you can see this thing is absolutely massive. He incorporated that big main chunk, which I guess is like the domed section where Jabba would be sitting, and then basically 2 grandstands off to the right and left sides of it. And this really just gives you a good look at just if you want to like try to attempt a Podrace MOC. This is probably, quite some ways smaller than minifig scale, yet it is still absolutely massive. So it just really gives you a good look at just the scale of the Podrace in general, and how crazy it would be to even try to attempt something like this. If we move on to the next photo, we get a better look at that big dome. If we look towards the middle of the photo, we can see Jabba is sitting in his little enclave. He's probably sleeping, because apparently that's what he does at the Podrace. But I really appreciate just the variety of minifigs in this MOC. Like, obviously, if you're building something like this, you need a lot of Tatooine looking minifigs, and I mean, in Star Wars, that's not an easy thing to do. Like, we don't typically get just kind of random bystander figures, so it's really up to your own interpretation and imagination to construct all of these figures. So the fact that this arena is so densely populated, I feel actually goes a really long way. I also like how he accomplished the top of the dome. Like, building those curved shapes at such a large scale is clearly not an easy thing to do, but it looks really nice. Like, it flows very well. That's the nice thing about when you, I guess, start building at such a large scale. A lot of the slopes and curved slopes become too steep of angles, if that makes sense, to work with, and get kind of subtle angles like you would see here. So you can kind of transition into using just purely brick techniques. Now, you still have to have, the knowledge and the skill to actually make the brick technique look good, but I mean, he clearly accomplished that very well here. And the fact that, like I said, is at such a large scale, I think actually goes a really long way. If we go to the next photo, we get a better look at some of the rock formations in the grandstands, which I always thought was pretty cool. Like, if you look at reference photos of the actual Podrace, you can see that there are actual like rocks kind of jutting through the middle of the grandstands, which I think is really cool. It gives you, I guess, just a better understanding of how this arena was really just kind of built right in the middle of like mountains, and I don't know, it's a nice reminder of kind of the surroundings that you're in. So I did appreciate that, and I like the fact that he used the dark tan slopes there to contrast with the tan of the actual stadium. And then if you look towards the top right of the picture, he has just some light gray kind of mechanical features of the MOC, which is kind of cool as well. It kind of breaks up a little bit of the monotony of the tan, but then also gives you an understanding of like, this isn't just like a standard, simple stadium with just seats built up, but we're still in the Star Wars universe. They still have their technology, so it's a good way to, I don't know, just make this look more Star Warsy, I think. The next photo looks at the starting line, which is, I think, just a really cool build. Once again, there's just some insane, like spherical and curved builds in this thing. And I remember when I first looked at this MOC, this is probably the first time I'd ever seen someone utilize the technique where you put a bunch of 1x2s together, then you bend them around to make a circle. I swear it took me forever to figure out that that's what he was doing there, but then once I figured it out, I was like, oh my god, like, that's genius. That's a great way to get, a nice perfect circle in Lego. So this is just, it's kind of a cool throwback for me to look at and just remember like all the cool things I noticed and that I picked up on looking at this build. And I think overall the starting line is actually a pretty insane looking build in terms of all the various shapes he had to incorporate there. If we move on to the next photo, we get a better look at the starting line from, I guess, the perspective of the racers. And I feel like this is just such a cool scene to be set. Like, you have the plethora of pod racers just sitting at the starting line. You even have the spectators kind of on top of the starting line area, which I always thought was a kind of a cool thing that they had in the pod race. And then you have just the various people kind of walking around near the pod racers getting set up for the race. So I just feel like this is a really lively MOC for those reasons. We move on to the next few photos. We just get a better look at the pod racers, and he actually put quite a bit of time and effort, as you can tell, into constructing a lot of these pod racers. This is Eldar Beto's pod racer. Unsurprisingly, the minifigure is missing. Unsurprisingly, the minifigure is missing from this pod racer, because who would want to show off that thing in a MOC? And yes, I do know there is a new or Aldar Beetle mold that looks much better than that. That would be my choice if I had to include that in a mock. Moving on to the next photo, we have Clegg Holdfast Podracer, and this is one I actually really liked. I actually did build one of these for myself from my collection of Podracers. Cheap plug, if you want to see my custom Podracers, go look at my channel. You can look it up. Just look up like Lego Podracers. It'll probably be one of the first ones that come up. But yeah, I really do like the design of this one as well. I think he accomplished it pretty well, and I also like that he used kind of a custom alien to make a figure that we haven't gotten in Lego so far. Next up, we have Deadbolt's Podracer. I think this is also one of my favorite designs. It's such an interesting looking Podracer, especially if you look at the reference photos. So I thought it was really cool that he incorporated this one as well. A lot of the nice things about the Podracers, especially when you're building in Star Wars, is they're also colorful. So if you're building, you know, like Tatooine, it's mostly tan, it's mostly dark tan, it's a very sandy area. A lot of these Podracers can be used to help just make the mock pop, you know, like they contrast really well with the mostly tan colored palette that you'd be using for a Tatooine mock. So that's one of the nicer things about building this specific location. Next up, we have Gizgano's Podracer, and this one looks so good. Like, I love the way he designed this. I think that the way he has those green slopes kind of converging together looks really nice for his Podracer. Even those quarter cylinder pieces in dark green towards the back look really nice, and then the purple cones to cap it off. Once again, like, the colors on these Podracers are just gorgeous, and I love being able to incorporate these into Star Wars mocks because you get some unconventional designs and just colors that you don't typically see in a Star Wars mock. And then finally, we get a look at Mahonic's Podracer. I'm kind of disappointed he didn't use the Reese figure for this. I guess this was made in 2012. Maybe Reese didn't get an actual mold for this, but that's besides the point. This is a pretty good looking Podracer as well. I think this is definitely one of my favorite designs. This is another one that I created myself, and his model just looks really good as well. So hopefully being able to show this off to you guys here in the mock showcase can evoke similar feelings of awe. It's kind of, I think a low-key mock, especially for one that's so large. So hopefully you got as much out of this as I did. And that's going to finish up the video today, guys. I hope that you enjoyed looking at these mocks as much as I enjoyed getting to show them off to you. Like I always say, just please go support the builders. The links are in the description. Show them some love and let them know just how awesome these mocks are. I'm sure they would certainly appreciate it. If you like what I do, go ahead and support the video by hitting the like button, support the channel by smashing that subscribe button, and I'll be back again very soon.